It is August 1978. New York City is completely unaware that it is sitting on the edge of the deadliest disaster in American history. Towering above Midtown Manhattan is the brand new Citicorp Center. At 59 stories and nearly 1,000 feet tall, it's a gleaming beacon of modern architecture. But beneath its smooth, aluminum facade, the building harbors a fatal flaw. A flaw so severe that a single strong windstorm could snap the tower in half. If the Citicorp Center falls, it won't just collapse straight down. It will topple like a massive domino, crushing the densest city blocks on Earth. Tens of thousands of people could die in a matter of seconds. And the terrifying truth? The engineers already know. Inside the building, an emergency, highly classified operation is underway. While executives work in their offices by day, a secret crew of welders takes over at night. They are frantically trying to fix the building before a massive storm, Hurricane Ella, slams into the eastern seaboard. The NYPD has secretly drawn up mass evacuation plans. The Red Cross is quietly put on standby for a mass casualty event. But not a single word of this is leaked to the public. Not to the press. Not to the people walking on the streets below. How did the crown jewel of the New York skyline become a ticking time bomb? It wasn't due to radical architectural risks or a lack of advanced engineering. The entire crisis, and the terrifying cover-up that followed, was caused by a single, seemingly harmless decision made by a contractor to save a fraction of a percent on construction costs. They swapped a set of specified welded joints for cheaper, standard steel bolts. This is the story of how a tiny attempt to save time and money almost destroyed Manhattan, and the college student who accidentally uncovered the secret. To understand the flaw, we have to go back to 1970. Citibank wanted a new global headquarters in Manhattan, and they found the perfect location at the corner of 53rd Street and Lexington Avenue. There was just one massive problem. The northwest corner of that block was already occupied by St. Peter's Lutheran Church. The church had been there since 1862, and they absolutely refused to sell their land and be displaced. Citibank's grand architectural vision was completely blocked. So, a deal was struck. The church would allow Citibank to build their skyscraper over them, but under one strict condition: the new building could not touch the church. Enter William LeMessurier, one of the most brilliant structural engineers of the 20th century. He was handed an impossible task: build a 915-foot skyscraper that essentially hovered over an existing building. LeMessurier's solution was nothing short of genius. Instead of putting the building's support columns in the four corners, like every other skyscraper in the world, he moved them to the center of each side. He placed the entire 59-story tower on four massive, 114-foot-tall stilts. This allowed the building to straddle the church entirely, leaving it untouched below. But putting a skyscraper on stilts creates a massive structural challenge. The corners of the building were completely unsupported. They were literally hanging in midair. To keep the tower from ripping itself apart under its own weight, LeMessurier designed a unique, external skeletal structure. He used massive steel V-shaped braces, called chevron bracing, that stacked up the sides of the building. These braces acted like giant funnels, channeling the weight of the structure away from the empty corners and down into the center stilts. And to counter the swaying caused by high-altitude winds, LeMessurier installed a cutting-edge piece of technology at the very top of the building: a tuned mass damper. This was a 400-ton block of concrete resting on a thin film of oil. When the wind pushed the building one way, the computer-controlled damper would shift its weight the opposite way, stabilizing the tower. On paper, it was an engineering masterpiece. It was elegant, innovative, and perfectly calculated. In 1977, the Citicorp Center opened to massive public acclaim. But what LeMessurier didn't know was that his masterpiece had already been quietly compromised during construction. In the original blueprints, LeMessurier mandated that the massive steel chevron braces had to be connected using full penetration welds. Welding steel at that scale is incredibly labor-intensive. It requires highly skilled workers, massive amounts of heat, and weeks of careful execution. But it creates a joint that is as strong as a continuous piece of solid steel. During the construction phase, the company hired to build the steel frame, Bethlehem Steel, realized that welding all those massive joints was going to be expensive and slow. They saw an opportunity to cut costs and speed up the timeline. They proposed changing the connections. Instead of welding the joints, they wanted to bolt them together using heavy-duty steel bolts. In standard skyscraper construction, switching from welds to bolts is completely routine. It's a standard way to save on specialized labor. The proposal was sent to LeMessurier's New York office, where it was reviewed by a subordinate. Looking at the standard building codes for wind resistance, the subordinate saw no issue and approved the change. William LeMessurier, the master architect of the building, was never directly informed. He assumed his tower was built exactly as he designed it, solid, welded, and invincible. The building was finished. The massive steel joints were bolted, not welded. And for a year, the building stood tall and proud in the Manhattan skyline, housing thousands of office workers. The tiny shortcut saved Bethlehem Steel a modest sum of money, but it introduced a catastrophic vulnerability that no one in the world knew existed. In June 1978, Diane Hartley, an undergraduate architecture student at Princeton University, was working on her senior thesis. She had chosen the newly built Citicorp Center as her subject. As she analyzed the unique design of the 4 stilts, she noticed something peculiar about the wind load calculations. Standard building codes only require engineers to calculate for winds hitting the building straight on, directly against the flat faces. But Hartley wondered about quartering winds. What happens when the wind hits the building diagonally, striking the corners instead of the flat sides? In a normal building with columns on the 4 corners, quartering winds aren't a massive issue. But the Citicorp Center was different. Its corners were hanging in midair. Hartley called William LeMessurier's firm to ask for the data on quartering winds. She spoke to a junior engineer, who confidently told her the building was perfectly safe. When LeMessurier heard about the student's inquiry, he decided to double-check the math himself. He wanted to prove that his innovative design could withstand any angle of attack. He ran the numbers for quartering winds. The results made his blood run cold. When a strong wind hit the Citicorp Center diagonally, the aerodynamic pressure actually increased the stress on the building's steel chevron braces by 40%. A 40% increase in stress. LeMessurier was initially worried, but he reminded himself that his massive, full-penetration welded joints could easily handle that extra load. Then, the hammer dropped. While reviewing the final construction documents to confirm the welds, he discovered the change order. The joints weren't welded. They were bolted. LeMessurier scrambled to calculate the maximum strength of the bolted joints against a quartering wind. The math was undeniable, and it was absolutely terrifying. If a high-speed wind struck the building at a 45-degree angle, the bolts would shear completely off. The chevron braces would fail, and the 59-story skyscraper would collapse. But what about the tuned mass damper? The 400-ton concrete block at the top of the building would surely counteract the swaying, right? LeMessurier checked the weather data. The damper required electricity to run. In a massive storm, the power in New York City often goes out. If the power failed, the damper would shut down. Without the damper, and with the weakened bolted joints, LeMessurier calculated that a windstorm strong enough to topple the Citicorp Center would occur, statistically, once every 16 years. He hadn't built an indestructible monument. He had built a guillotine hanging over the city of New York. LeMessurier faced an agonizing choice. If he stayed silent, he might get away with it. But if the building fell, he would be responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of people. If he confessed, his career would be destroyed. His reputation would be ruined, and his firm would be bankrupted by lawsuits. He chose to speak. He immediately flew to New York and met with the executives at Citibank. He laid out the math. The building was critically unsafe, and they had to fix it immediately. The executives were horrified, but they agreed to fund the emergency repairs. However, they made a critical decision: the public could not know. If the truth leaked, it would cause mass panic. And so began one of the most intense, secretive engineering operations in history. The plan was to weld 2-inch thick steel plates over all 200 of the bolted joints, essentially turning them into the massive welded joints they were originally supposed to be. To keep it a secret, the welders could only work at night. Every evening at 8 p.m., after the office workers went home, teams of welders flooded into the building. They tore open the drywall, exposed the massive steel joints, and sparked up their torches. They welded continuously until 4 a.m. Before the sun came up, they frantically cleaned the workspace, vacuumed the debris, and threw up temporary drywall. When the office workers arrived at 9 a.m., the building looked perfectly normal. No one had a clue that the skeleton of the building was being desperately reinforced while they typed at their desks. But the clock was ticking. In late August, halfway through the repairs, a massive weather system formed in the Atlantic Ocean. It was Hurricane Ella. The storm was a Category 4, and it was heading straight for New York City. The building's joints were only half welded. It was not ready. The city secretly mobilized. The NYPD cordoned off a 10-block radius around the tower under the guise of an emergency drill. The mayor's office prepared a mass evacuation order for Midtown Manhattan. The Red Cross was quietly instructed to prepare thousands of blood bags and body bags. Inside the tower, the welders worked furiously, racing against the approaching hurricane. The tension was suffocating. The fate of the city rested on the speed of their welding torches. Then, a miracle happened. Just hours before landfall, Hurricane Ella stalled. It hit a cold front, turned abruptly east, and swept harmlessly out to sea. New York City was spared. The secret night crew spent several more weeks finishing the welds. By mid-September, every single bolted joint had been reinforced with solid steel plates. The building was finally secure. It could now withstand a 700-year storm. The crisis was averted. The total cost of the secret emergency repairs was $8 million. More than $38 million in today's money. And the most incredible part of the story? The cover-up worked perfectly. The public remained entirely ignorant. The press never caught on. For nearly 20 years, the true story of the Citicorp Center was an industry secret, discussed only in hushed tones among elite engineers. It wasn't until 1995, when a writer for The New Yorker published an exposé, that the world finally learned how close Manhattan came to a catastrophic disaster. And what about Diane Hartley, the Princeton student whose simple question triggered the entire revelation? She never knew. She submitted her thesis, graduated, and moved on with her life. It took almost 3 decades for her to find out that her phone call had literally saved tens of thousands of lives. The Citicorp crisis remains a chilling reminder of the fragility of the systems around us. Bethlehem Steel didn't set out to build a deadly trap. They just wanted to save a little bit of time and a little bit of money on labor. But in the world of high-stakes engineering, there is no such thing as a harmless shortcut. When you compromise the foundational integrity to protect the bottom line, it's never a question of if disaster will strike. It is only ever a question of when. If you enjoyed this forensic deep dive, make sure to subscribe. We trace the world's worst disasters back to the one absurdly small decision that made them inevitable. See you in the next one.